Thank you everybody for coming. Thanks for coming early, getting up, coming to hear us speak today at Creative Mornings, and thank you again to Creative Mornings for putting this on. I'm an avid fan of their work. One of my favorites is by Amina Tussaud. It's about shine theory, and so I suggest you check that out. Shine Theory and the Art of Humility, something I take into the practice with our teams. I'm here to talk about courage, as you heard, but first I'll introduce myself so you know who the hell I am. My name's Simon J. Green. I'm a producer, I'm a writer, and I'm now your friend. Nice to meet you all. For 11 years, I've been a producer, writer, and a friend, and there's two things I do really. I'm a storyteller, and my purpose there is to tell fun stories that audiences love. And I've also been an arts entrepreneur. And so for that to me is about trying to get more out of society for artists. I think we could have a better lot in life. As a result, I've worked with over 150 clients at the Arts Centre Melbourne, Hewlett-Packard, Nintendo are some of them. Over 200 projects, being video, but also websites and marketing and communications, strategy and planning. Over 570 videos, I tried to count as best as I could, and one beard. And she's in the audience tonight, just kidding. That's my creative life, but I also have cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic illness, you're born with it. It's not contagious, so don't worry, but I may cough, so I'll just do the vampire style. You should do that on trains too, it's healthy. Cystic fibrosis is quite complicated, but in short, it's lungs that are slowly degrading, so it's like having worse and worse asthma over time, and it's a digestive system that doesn't quite work properly. And so, case in point, that's me 2 days after I was born. I was born with a blocked bowel, and so I was sent straight to the emergency department of the Royal Children's, and I was operated on at only 2 days. Since then, if you'll excuse me, you might not see it all the way up the back, but I have a nice big zipper across my belly. I've actually had 7 different surgeries on subsequent problems throughout my childhood. The problem is I keep getting these blocked bowels that keep happening over and over again. And I do remember one time I was in hospital when I was kind of in my early teens, and I'd had a twisted bowel. It's where the blockage is your guts are trying to push it so hard that the bowels actually twist around. It's incredibly painful. It's the worst pain I've ever experienced, and I was sent to hospital. But because I'd been operated on so many times, the doctors were hoping that it would just pass naturally. So they were giving me lots of drugs to move that process along, but it took 5 days of really heavy pain medication. So I was in and out of it. I don't really remember it. And my dad always told me, because I couldn't remember much, that my eyes got the bags under my eyes got so heavy it looked like I had black eyes. And because I was not really able to eat, I just became incredibly skeletal. And Dad said it was the first time he was really worried that I wouldn't make it. My poor parents, on that topic, were told when I was born that I had a life expectancy of 20. That's what most life expectancies for CF were back in 1984. But I'm lucky. I'm 33, so I made it. I'm doing all right. Because of treatments and how technology has advanced the way we treat cystic fibrosis, also because I'm kind of lucky in the severity of my CF, I've done all right. People who weren't so lucky, and to show you how random a genetic disease can appear, I used to go to the Royal Children's. Every kid who has CF does from up to 18, and I would be in a ward with other cystic fibrosis patients. Every single one of those is dead. They didn't make it. I was the only one that did. I do remember there was this, when I was a toddler, there was this girl in the hospital who seemed so much older to me, but she was probably only 10. But she'd done a really good job of designing and decorating her bed and her space. She had toys all along the walls. She had this pink frilly V cushion she used to boost herself up, and she had lots of coloring books. So I would toddle along and get up on the bed, and my parents got along with her parents, so they'd chat, and we'd play and we'd color in, and I had a great little time with her. And one day I had to go off to do one of the many procedures you do when you're in hospital for weeks at a time. And I came back, and I remember that she was gone, and the pink cushion was there, and I intuited in my little tiny brain that she wasn't going to come back. and she'd passed away, and her mother had left, and the pink frilly V cushion was taken away, but I always remember it. It stayed in my head ever since. So the point, CF is shit, but creativity is really, really fun. So I've gone through a lot of crap. I spent my life expecting to die young, and that actually has been a driver. It's been a real fire for me to get as much done as possible before I shuffle off. And so my view on mortality, it's really helped shape my creativity. I never had a backup career, for example. I went straight out of uni and was a paid hustling artist from day one. And thinking about putting a story out into the world or starting a business, and then thinking that that is courage, it just seems so small to me. Because if someone hates the story I put out into the world, or it's really nastily criticized, or if a business fails, oh well, who cares? I'm not dead. And so what I've found is that with that perspective of knowing that you could die, courage is something that is measured in degrees. Courage can mean something very different to different people. And I want to talk today about how being creatively brave is not as hard as we sometimes make out if we can change our perspective. So here's a nice quote. Courage is knowing what not to fear. Now, that says Plato, but I got it from the internet, so it could be by Frodo Baggins for all I know. The link between courage and fear, it's been made by many, many people over centuries. And when I was given the topic of courage, I was so excited because it means I can talk about fear. And fear is my favorite subject. It's something I'm always exploring in my work as an artist because I think that fear and our inability to overcome it or show courage is linked to some of the worst human actions, some of the worst human impulses. There's even been studies that found that fear and anxiety drive a conservative's political beliefs. And whether you're conservative or not, I do find that the inability to progress, to regress in fact, out of fear, well, I think that's not courageous. I think it's far more courageous to progress into new territory and explore new things. And so fear fascinates me when I get frustrated with the world and try and work my way back why that frustration exists and always come back to someone being afraid. And I've learned there are actually two types of fear. There's mortal fear and social fear. So mortal fear is fear of death, fear of illness, fear of injury. It's why we avoid snakes, it's why we don't run across highways. Social fear is fear of things like the other, fear of race, fear of gender, fear of sexuality, and even down to things like fear of failure or fear of success. And the thing about social fear is that it's absolutely constructed. It's completely related to the culture that you live in. And if you go to different cultures, fears change. They shift and change depending on the culture. And what's interesting about that is that mortal fear is built in. It doesn't matter what country, what continent, no one wants to die, everyone's afraid of being injured. But social fears change. If you go to another society, if you go to another culture, their fear will end up changing your fear and what you are afraid of. And I find that fascinating because that means it's something you learn. Social fear is something you learn, and that means that fear is something you can change. So I make horror and I make satire stories. That's the main thing I do in my writing and my work. And I like them because I realize both explore fear. Horror is taking a social fear and turning it into a monster. And now that monster presents a mortal fear, so we can kind of be more afraid of it more universally. And monsters are different in different societies. If you go look at the myths of cultures that are quite different to our own, you'll discover monsters you've never heard of and seem really strange. Why is that a monster? And it's because that culture fears a different set of things than we do. And you'll also note that the same sorts of monsters we're familiar with represent very different fears in different cultures. So, for example, werewolves have been pedophiles, but they've also been metaphors for male aggression. And as a result, just recently, there's been a plethora over the last 10 years of feminist werewolf movies exploring that very topic. Zombies have sometimes been a fear of the spread of things like HIV, but there's also been about a fear of consumerism. So very different types of fear, really just completely constructed on what is terrifying at the time. So with horror, we explore our anxieties around these social fears, and we overcome them because the protagonist will show courage and defeat the beast. Horror movies can be a tool for helping us deal with our fears. Now, another way to overcome fear is to laugh at it. And I've realized that's what satire is. So mortal fear makes total sense. No one wants to die, no one wants to be hit by a truck, no one wants to be bitten by a snake. But social fears, fear of a person's skin color, fear of who they go to bed with, Fear of success. What the fuck is fear of success? I'm gonna die. I could have died of CF many, many times over. I want to succeed as many times as possible before I kick the bucket. Fear of success. Social fear is stupid. It's dumb. And that's what satire does. It takes some of the dumbest fears that we have in our society, realizes how stupid they are, and just makes fun of them. Makes fun of them, makes us laugh at them, and that reduces how scared we are of them. It reduces the power of that fear. So here's another quote. Courage is resistance to fear. Mastery of fear. It's not absence of fear. This one's from a book, so I know it's real. I know it is Mark Twain. I actually got this quote from a friend of mine. His mother passed away from suicide when he was very young. And when I was telling him I was doing this talk, he was keen to share this quote with me. And what I like about it is, if you keep going into the rest of this quote, he talks about fleas. Consider the flea. If courage was just the act, then the flea is one of the most courageous beasts in the world because it jumps on dogs, it jumps on humans, things that are vastly superior to it in strength and size. And it does it courageously. But it's not courage because the flea's ignorant of those risks. It doesn't understand them. It doesn't have a consciousness like we do. And that's where fear comes in. You can't have courage without understanding fear and overcoming it. So I think for me, that quote is also about perspective. Talking about perspective, there's another horror trope. And it's this idea that if you have come close to death or you've maybe died and come back again, then a veil is lifted and you can see ghosts, you can see the other side, you can see hell. And I've always felt like that's a metaphor for people like me, for how I see the world, for how my friend whose mother passed away when he was very young, for other people I've spoken to who have disabilities or have early life tragedies in their life. I feel like that veil lifted is how we see the world, because we don't sweat the small stuff, because we can see the small stuff for what it is. Small, that's right. It's tiny. So from my perspective, as someone who's nearly died or been expecting to die most of his life, taking risks in my art or for my clients' work, it's not a big deal. And we all know, or we should know as creatives, that the best work comes from taking risks. But still, so many of us freeze. We fail to show courage. We fail to overcome our own fears. And then we fail to show courage in our work. We fail to push our clients to do interesting concepts or interesting ideas. And sometimes we fail to push ourselves. So even though you don't have my perspective, you're all gonna die. You all know people who have died. You all know people who have suffered. You know mortal fear. You know what it is. We all do. It's universal. I want to tell you about two people I worked with who absolutely failed to show courage, who could not overcome their fear, even in the smallest of stakes. And I want to show you how, if they had just been able to shift their perspective the tiniest amount, they could have actually been creatively brave. So first I'll describe the client, keeping them anonymous, of course, for safety. They were a medium to small business-to-business service. So we're talking your accountants, your insurance, your lawyers, that type of firm. And they had offices all around the world. And I spoke to their managing director or owner and their new marketing manager. They wanted to make a video. And the owner was sure that they could compete with the big guns, your PwCs, your BCGs, your KPMGs. He was sure he could compete with those because they had something that those big companies didn't have. They had a personal touch. I guess his model was based on Dunder Mifflin. Yeah. There was also the marketing manager I was sitting down with at the same time, and she was very new to that position. And she was really keen to make her mark with this video. This video was her way to show her creativity. So we sat down and they showed me this video. This is screenshots from the video they showed me. And it's a large company who had made a video. And it wasn't one of those big giant ones, but it was very much in the realm of what they were after. And when we spoke about it, and they said that was what they wanted to do in animation, we broke it down. I said, you know, I think if you guys want to do something more interesting, we can look at this video and look at, like, it's very much of its time, a white background. Everyone was doing white backgrounds then. Cookie cutter icons, you'll notice, that anyone could buy, but then they don't really match up. There's this kind of fake 3D, then there's flat images. The colors are really dull, just like a dull flat blue and a dull flat green, and the font's not the most inspired font choice in the world. So I said to them, with these sorts of criticisms of that video, which wasn't their video in mind, do you want to stand out? Do you want to stand out from your competitors? And they said, yes, of course. And they wanted to commit to it. And I challenged them because I know that standing out is risky. You are literally standing out from a pack. And a pack, we're all pack animals, it's safe, it's familiar. We know what that is. Out here, you're on your own. You're vulnerable, you're exposed. But for me, the whole bloody point of marketing is to stand out so that people see you and say, great, I want to use you, you're fantastic. You are completely different to everyone else, so I can actually see you, and then I can decide if I like you. So I tested them on their commitment to stand out. They said yes. I said, fantastic. We took their ideas, we came up with some concepts, and we came back with this. So this is just from our storyboards, because you'll see why in a little bit. We went with a black background instead of white, because not a lot of people were doing that at the time. We said that their images should be illustrated from scratch rather than buying over-the-counter icons. We went with this interesting rotating motif to animate the images rather than just having them kind of wash in and out over the top of each other. And we went for a really strong black, red, and white color scheme, which is, traditionally a very strong color scheme, but it was also their brand. So cool, we're able to find some really good ways for them to stand out. Now, I know that this isn't breakthrough work. This video is not amazing, it's not an incredible concept. But here my perspective is already showing, because I know it's not incredible, but for them, and based on their competitors at the time, this was standing out. This would really would have stood out from the rest of their competitors. And it's important for them to stand out. Their success relies on standing out. So they said, yep, they were cool with that concept. We moved through the stages, and animation can be quite complex. There's the script, there's the storyboard, there's the voiceover, there's the music, then there's the creation of the illustration, then there's the animation itself. So a lot of stages, a lot of things we go through for sign-off. We kicked that off, and I remember very early on at the storyboard stage, the marketing manager called me in. I'm like, okay. And she said, if this is what the animation is going to look like, we have a problem. And she thought the storyboards were the finished animation. Now, if anyone's ever made an animation, you know what I'm about to explain next. These are videos that we've made before. We showed them these videos. They're really nice. We've got 3D work, we've got 2D work, we've got a really nice mix of things. And they were pleased with that work, and so I took them back through those and showed them the shitty hand-drawn sketches that made up the storyboards for this and explained that that's how you do a storyboard unless you want to spend a fortune on those storyboards. They understood that. They were relieved. They said, okay, yep, sorry. They said, go on back into it, get back into the process. So I walked out going, cool, convinced them, but in my mind, I'd done it enough to know that this client was responding from a place of fear. She was nervous about standing out. Even at the storyboard stage, it was a problem. And in that moment of fear, she did something we all do when we're afraid. She tried to get control. And that's fine. It's my job to reassure her that putting their trust in us is totally the right choice. Oops, sorry, just get rid of a notification here. We're the best people to do that. As creative people, we're always living on the edge. We're putting stuff out into the world. We're exposing ourselves. We're doing things outside of the pack. It is in our very nature to do that. And then for me, who has just had this other perspective of I could die at any moment, then that's fine. It's my job to help her when she's out there on her own, stand next to her and say, it's totally fine to be exposed. Remember why you're here. It's to stand out. Standing out is good. And that's what our job is, I think, as creative people working with clients. We are their Sherpas on Fear Mountain. So we progressed, but I kept getting calls and emails responding from a place of fear. They were worried about the dark background. They thought that white looked more professional. I tried to bolster their courage, reminded them they were trying to be different, and we compromised. We went with a red background rather than going all the way white. They sent me an email with suggestions on the illustration style, and when I look at what they're referencing that classic video that they'd shown me in the first place with over-the-counter icons. So again, I took them through the importance of having their own visual style. And look, let's compromise again, and instead of using icons that a million people have used in the past, let's create our own custom icons from scratch so that at least they're all cohesive. Then the white background resurfaced. Then suddenly they wanted to use a full range of colors because the marketing manager had just redone their brand with 8 main colors. Not secondary colors, all 8 were main colors. Then the general manager suddenly jumps in and wants to make changes too. So we end up with this. Look familiar? Oh my God, it's the same. I realized at some point in this job the only way to get this done was to give them exactly what they wanted, even though they knew it was exactly what everyone else was doing. They had failed to overcome their fears. And it wasn't going to be the best outcome. They knew it, I knew it, but still I made it because that's what they wanted. And you know what? They hated it. They refused to pay me. I had to take them to court and get the money. And they were right to hate it. I hated it. It's crap. It's nothing. Compared to what we were going to do, it was just the same as what everyone else had done. They had failed to realize that a creative problem is not a problem. You won't die from a creative problem. So if they had shown the slightest bit of perspective shift, if they had just held on to their confidence that they could have done something incredible, then they would have done something brave. And the funny thing is, to me, that original concept isn't even that brave. So what were they afraid of? Well, I think it's important to try and understand your client's fears, so when you're understanding their tolerance for bravery. And I think for him, the owner, he had a fear of being inferior. He always referenced these big guys and how he wanted to compete with them and how he was just as good as them. And for the marketing manager, I think she had a fear of not being creative. She was from a marketing background which could be considered a creative area, but she was working in a very uncreative field in this firm. And I think she kept talking about wanting to make her mark with this video. It became her video more than it became mine. What's interesting is that their inability to overcome those specific fears, to show courage, led to them playing out their worst fears. It wasn't creative, and it wasn't any different to the rest of them, and it couldn't compete with the big guys. So let's talk about worst fears. Everybody's got them. They're all out there inside you, like little demons. I found an antidote to your worst fear is to explore it. For example, when I was a little kid, and I was scared that a vampire was going to come and kill me in my sleep, I'd pretend to be a vampire. I'd imagine what it was like to be one, looking in at a little kid. And suddenly I felt a hell of a lot better, because being a vampire is rad. And I found a really simple way that you can do this too. Here's a really simple mental exercise. Introduce yourself to yourself and say what you make. Think about a project coming up, or something that you do constantly. Then think about the very worst thing that could happen in that project. Think about the thing you fear most. It just happened. That thing you fear the most happened. Go through it. What happens next? Because that's not the end. Something happens after that. It's not the end of the story. So I run this with people who are feeling afraid, and they mention that they're fearful. I did it at a workshop just recently, and there were 2 people I spoke to. And what's interesting is as soon as you do it, they always have a plan. And you probably already had a plan in your heads about what you would do next. I spoke to someone who was so nervous, she developed a product, and she was so nervous about showing it to customers because she was worried they'd say that they didn't like it. So she just hadn't shown her product to any customers yet. Someone else was going to leave their full-time job and start a business, and they were terrified of 2 things. They were terrified that the business would fail. They were also terrified that it was going to be so successful they wouldn't be able to keep up. Very tiny wiggle room for that person. But when I took them through this process, as soon as they said fear, I just wrote that down, made them do it, and they immediately had plans. They had plans for what they would do if the business failed or customers didn't like it. They just changed their plans. And I find that when you work through your fear, it can breed courage. That's how you can bring courage to yourself. Being creative is a courageous thing. It's about creating alternatives and paths around a problem. So what I want you to do is try and use my perspective. I don't want you to let social fear overcome you. Being creative is valuable, it's powerful, and like I said, it's a lot of fun. Now, you may not have a deathly disease like me or lost someone in a horrible way early in your life. But I'll remind you again, you're all going to die. And that doesn't mean then that you can't draw on my perspective and perspectives like my own to boost your own courage. It's not trite to say that you could die at any moment when I say it, because I know it, and I'm telling you it could happen. So don't live your life in fear of the small stuff. Take risks, be creatively brave, have courage, because my God, so little of it matters. Just have fun. Don't make this. Make this. Hope this isn't incredibly loud. My favorite place is Twitter, so please tweet me and tell me what you're most afraid of. Thank you very much.